air feels coded tonight, dense, electric, almost aware. The Twin Eclipse Frequency hums beneath your skin, calling every hidden layer of memory to surface. This isn't chaos, it's reassembly. As the Oct 18 window expands, your magnetic core prepares for rewrite, a total recalibration of identity between solar command and lunar surrender. What once fractured now fuses. Every heartbeat becomes a signal from your original blueprint, whispering, "Remember the light that built you." This is the moment when shadow and source finally speak the same language. You begin to notice how time folds around simple movements. Reaching for water becomes a study in magnetics. Your hand aligns with a current you didn't know you were tracking. Not urgency precision. In the twin geometry of sun and moon, every action either harmonizes or fractures. You listen for the seam where they meet, a faint click like a loom rethreading your name. You can feel the click now. Sounds you once ignored amplify, as if reality turned the gain to reveal the hiss beneath the song. That hiss is residue old scripts, contracts, vows that no longer match your harmonic. The moment you stop supplying attention, they depixelate. This is not avoidance, it is accurate nourishment. You are feeding the future frequency, not the echo. The emotional weather swings without apology, tenderness, then heat, then an empty clarity that scares people who equate stillness with absence. You begin to distinguish between collapse and surrender. Collapse is the nervous system losing the pattern. Surrender is the nervous system choosing a larger one. Your body knows the difference. On Oct 18, its inner instruments recalibrate, the way a compass remembers north after a storm. Relationships become mirrors with higher resolution. You notice micro-lies, tiny edits you used to place between yourself and the world to seem acceptable. They can't hold shape under eclipse light. You don't expose anyone. You depose performances. When a voice arrives, coated in fear, you respond with geometry, fewer words, cleaner angles, slower breath. You find that boundaries are not walls, but tuning forks. They set the key before the song begins. Dreams turn instructional. Symbols repeat like flashcards from a teacher bridges. Corridors, a child handing you a page that glows from the center. You wake remembering the sensation of being edited by kindness. The rewrite doesn't punish old code. It thanks it for carrying you this far and then releases it to archive. Gratitude becomes a technology, an elegant dissolver of knots. Money, work, and creative output shift from extraction to exchange. You feel the difference between producing and emitting. Production grinds against the field. Emission glides with it. You experiment with letting inspiration set the tempo. Some tasks finish in minutes because you've stopped resisting the current carrying them. Others pause indefinitely because your frequency would be misused at that door. The refusal isn't fear, it's fidelity. The hidden test arrives when silence expands. The mind reaches for commentary, for proof you're progressing. But progress is the wrong measurement. Coherence is the right one. You practice the art of unasking the willingness to remain with a question long enough for it to molt. In that spaciousness, the twin eclipse performs its finest work. It braids your masculine clarity and feminine receptivity into a single, living thread. By night's end, you aren't chasing awakening across horizons. You are fastening it to breath, to how you place a cup on a table, to the tone you choose when no one can reward you. The rewrite is not a cosmic thunderclap, it's 1,000 precise permissions returning home. And as the window narrows, you understand the quietest truth: nothing essential was ever missing, only mislabeled, awaiting the right light to read it. You don't fall into the past surges through you like static after lightning. Frames of childhood, cities you barely visited, Promises whispered into pillows flicker at once. It feels like broken code until you notice the pattern. Each shard arrives with a small permission attached. Breathe here, release here, reclaim this. The body shakes. Not from fear, but from file transfer. You name it the data storm because language needs a handle. But the truth is gentler. These are recovery scripts. Your system is restoring from a golden backup that predates every distortion. The flashes aren't punishment. They're checksum pings confirming integrity. When an image stings a hallway smell, a slammed door, you meet it with the cleanest exhale you can make. The scene dissolves, leaving only the lesson. Sounds sharpen the hum of the fridge, the motorway, the thin ringing behind your ears that used to worry you. Now you recognize it as the carrier wave of arrival. On that frequency, memory isn't linear, it's radial. Events cluster by meaning, not calendar. Forgiveness becomes a sorting algorithm. What refuses to sort identifies itself as a living contract you can dissolve by speaking clearly, sometimes aloud, sometimes in the slow syllables of breath. You witness the mind's favorite trap narrating. It wants a villain, a motif, a morale. But the scripts do not need a narrator. They need a witness. So you practice uncommented seeing. A scene from when you abandoned yourself due to someone else's discomfort enters, and you refuse to abandon yourself again while watching it. Stability becomes retroactive healing. The child in the memory looks up as if noticed. Your skin conducts a cool electricity. The palms tingle. The soles map gravity more precisely. You drink water and taste minerals. You are not getting more sensitive in the fragile way. You are regaining resolution. The storm is a pixel upgrade. With every clarity gained, a strand of code rewrites from survival to presence. Some memories come as body postures, the way shoulders curl to take up less space, the way you swallowed words to keep the room smooth. You change the posture mid-recall. Shoulder blades widen like opening blinds. Nothing terrible happens. New code writes itself. Safety as internal jurisdiction. Then the edge case, a scene you swore you'd never revisit. The heart hammers. Adrenaline argues for flight. You anchor to the ground through the feet and name the 3 things you can feel right now. The scene tries to escalate, but you change the frame rate. Slower, slower. The monster reveals itself as compression, too many feelings squeezed into one tiny moment. You decompress it across time. Grief in the morning, anger at noon, relief by dusk. No single hour has to carry everything again. When the flashes subside, residue remains a fine dust of unlived alternatives. You do not chase them. You bless them for pointing at values you can honor now. The storm passes the way all weather does by being allowed. In the quieter air, your core hum is unmistakable, like a lighthouse audible. This is what the rewrite protects, not a new identity to perform, but the original signal, recovered and reseeded in breath. You sense it first as pressure, not pain, a density gathering behind the sternum, waiting for translation. Every heartbeat sounds less like thump and more like tone. It's as if something inside you has stopped speaking in words and started humming in color. The core rewrite doesn't announce itself with thunder. It unfolds through syntax dissolving. Meaning begins to move through vibration rather than vocabulary. You no longer describe your feelings. You radiate them. There is a rhythm between inhale and exhale that wasn't there before. Inhale carries data in. Exhale transmits calibration out. You realize the breath is a wireless network between worlds. The lungs become translators for the soul. Each time you resist, the signal distorts, and the pulse flares until you remember to soften. It's not asking for control, it's asking for cooperation. The chest becomes a cathedral of frequencies, tuning themselves back to origin pitch. You catch yourself mid-thought and feel the rearrangement happen. Sentences that used to spiral into fear suddenly reroute into geometry, triangles of calm, spirals of knowing. You no longer convince yourself, you configure yourself. The core rewrite is literacy and energy reading sensations as truth before they compress into emotion. Your body becomes fluent in what used to be mystical. Nerves spark along the spine. They're not random, they're editing tools, rewriting neural hieroglyphs. You feel the letters of past pain being reassembled into light code. The scar on your chest warms as if unbraiding old meanings. Everything once labeled hurt reveals itself as condensed light, waiting for permission to expand. When you stop naming it suffering, it stops contracting. In conversation, you notice a strange grace. Words leave your mouth already glowing, as if encoded with your new frequency. People hear you differently. Even silence gains texture. You start listening for vibration instead of opinion. Truth now feels like a tone that hums through the entire body. Falsehood buzzes like static. Your discernment becomes musical. At night, when stillness deepens, the pulse composes its own symphony. You feel strings of light threading through ribs, weaving organ to organ. The heart isn't a pump, now it's a prism. Every beat refracts the unseen into visible alignment. The more transparent you become, the more light passes through without resistance. Tears come not from sadness, but from pressure equalization between worlds. The hidden mechanism reveals itself. The rewrite is not adding anything new. It's deleting mistranslations. Every belief that said I am small was just a mistranslated signal of I am specific. Every fear of loss was a confused echo of transformation. Once the system corrects the language, emotional bandwidth frees itself. You feel lighter, not because something left, but because interpretation changed. By dawn, the pulse steadies into a new baseline. The heart's tone sounds like home, an internal sunrise unlinked from clocks. You understand now why words became light. Language was always meant to be a carrier wave for remembrance. You breathe once more, and the air itself bends in acknowledgement. Whispering through the ribs, rewrite complete. You notice it first in reflective surfaces the face doesn't land. Edges soften, features smear into shimmer, as though the mirror has decided to measure you by tone instead of contour. Panic flares for a breath. The old reflex to reassemble yourself by biography name. Roles. Histories. Then the pulse speaks through your ribs. Hold. When you stop insisting on an image, a frequency arrives. Not a picture of you, but you as pitch. The fear doesn't vanish. It widens until there's room for light to move through it. In public, you feel less like a person performing and more like a field adjusting. Conversations become wave meetings. Some voices harmonize effortlessly. Others scrape like sand against glass, requesting polish, not punishment. You quit bargaining with projections. When someone needs you to be small so their certainty holds, the mirror collapses and only vibration answers. It sounds like a gentle no that the body understands before the mind objects. Memories try to restack your old identity. You watch the montage victories, failures, the good mask, the clever mask, the useful wounds. Habit reaches for one to wear, but the fabric doesn't fit because the loom changed. Frequency will not pin itself to costumes that restrict expansion. You mourn how long you believed survival demanded an image. The mourning is brief. The relief is oceanic. Dreams help. You walk through halls where every mirror is covered, yet you navigate by hum. Doors open when your breath matches their threshold tone. You wake translating the lesson reflection was a training wheel. Resonance is the vehicle. In daylight, you test it. You set your posture by sound chin lower, spine buoyant, Attention diffuse like peripheral hearing. The world answers with less friction. Timelines that once snagged now release with a soft click. There's a social disorientation if you're not a stabilized picture. Who meets others? The answer rises like heat presence. Presence has edges cleaner, kinder. You discover that boundaries are not declarations, but frequencies that prearrange outcomes. A clear boundary feels like an orchestra tuning to A before the piece begins. Conflict drains away because the key is set. The hidden test arrives when someone offers a mirror you would have accepted before flattery that cages, criticism that defines, nostalgia that freezes. You feel the hook but let it pass through, not rejection transmission. You send back a tone of spacious acknowledgement and the script can't attach. This is what replaces fear expansion, not as size but as available room for truth. Body phenomena increase a cool wind across the cheeks indoors, a pressure halo at the brow, hands sparking when speech tightens. Rather than pathologize, you let sensation compose your next choice. You become skilled at micro-adjustments, 1 degree of honesty more, 1 beat of breath slower, 1 ounce of force less. Results compound. What used to require dramatic effort now resolves by subtle tuning. Power reveals itself as precision. Eventually, you stand before an actual mirror again. The face returns, but it's translucent to itself. You can see through the features to the field that animates them. You smile because the picture no longer commands allegiance. It's a helpful glyph, nothing more. Behind it, the frequency expands like dawn refusing borders. You turn away without attachment. Already humming the truth you finally learn to recognize. Identity is not the frame, it's the light that keeps enlarging the room. You discover a seam in time where nothing asks anything of you. It appears between 2 heartbeats, a thin, lucid pause that doesn't belong to thought. You slip into it like stepping into shade on a bright road. The body loosens its negotiations. Muscles release their opinion of the day. Sound thins to a soft horizon. In that seam, neutrality isn't indifference. It's clarity without charge. You are not empty, you are unhooked. The field recognizes this stance and reorganizes. What normally ricochets through your system, other people's urgency, the swarm of narratives, the magnetic pull of unfinished scenes meets a surface with no grip. Friction drops, heat leaves, residue evaporates like mist off stone. You begin to measure choices by how easily they keep you within that pause. Some options glitter but cost too much signal. Others look plain yet preserve the seam. So they win. This is not asceticism. It's acoustics. You're learning which environments amplify your baseline and which ones scramble it. The calibration is quiet but consequential. Old habits try to equate neutrality with weakness. They mistake non-reactivity for passivity. You test the difference. A message arrives with bait disguised as urgency. Instead of explaining, you wait 1 breath beyond the reflex to defend. The moment stretches and the bait reveals itself. You answer from center, brief, exact, kind. The entanglement never forms. Your nervous system adopts a new default: rest first. Not collapse, rest as readiness. In the pause, you feel the architecture of attention align awareness behind the eyes. Weight in the pelvis, breath widening the back. From here, perception sharpens. You hear subtext without absorbing it. You see the fork before the path splits. Silence becomes a tool of renovation. It erases residue not by scrubbing, but by refusing to echo it. When grief surfaces, neutrality gives it shape without verdict. Tears move cleanly and end when they are finished. Not when exhaustion wins. When anger rises, neutrality grants it a safe conduit. It speaks truth without burning the room. You experiment with micro-pauses in ordinary acts before answering, before lifting a cup, before stepping through a doorway. Each pause updates the system. The future stops feeling like a cliff and starts behaving like a room with many doors. You realize you don't need guarantees. You need a reliable center. Neutrality supplies it on demand. The hidden mechanism reveals itself. Neutrality is protective because it is non-stick. Projection, flattery, panic, praise all slide off and pool on the ground where they can be seen rather than worn. From that ground, accurate compassion becomes simple. You can sit near pain without swallowing it. You can celebrate without losing the thread. By evening, the seam widens. The pause isn't a special state you must earn. It's the unbroken background you keep remembering. You move inside it like water moving inside water. Decisions feel pre-resolved. The world still turns. Storms still form. But your interior weather holds steady. A barometer set to true. When sleep arrives, you do not collapse into it. You meet it as a colleague. 2 heartbeats, and the seam opens further. In that spaciousness, the day's residue dissolves to a final shimmer. You cross the threshold unguarded because you no longer need to guard. Neutrality is watching, and it keeps what matters whole. It begins as warmth behind the skull, a subtle sunrise where thought dissolves into brightness. The heat climbs through the scalp like liquid gold, not burning but remembering. Your crown tingles, and the silence you cultivated becomes conductive. The solar recall has started not an external download, but an internal re-illumination. The body acts like a temple rediscovering its altar. You feel devotion without an object, purpose without agenda. Light threads downward through the spine, seeking ground. Each vertebra becomes a key turning in sequence, unlocking dormant circuits of will. The fire isn't rage or ambition, it's direction. You remember movement as prayer, effort as music. The current asks nothing except participation. You inhale, and the light answers by widening. Exhale, and it flows outward, mapping new geometry through your limbs. Images arrive, not as visions but as recognitions. You see yourself in other epochs, planting, healing, teaching, wandering the same pulse, wearing different shapes. They overlap until the identities fuse into one continuous intention service through presence. The memory of why you came isn't a mission statement. It's a frequency returning to default. You feel it hum at the base of your skull, a solar metronome syncing body and cosmos. Old fatigue dissolves like ash. The heaviness of trying to matter melts. You realize you were never meant to do light work. You were meant to be lit work. The distinction rewrites the nervous system. Energy once scattered across striving gathers into coherence. You no longer push reality forward. You radiate it awake. Interactions change again. When others speak from fear, the crown fire softens instead of defending. You sense the luminous corridor between your crown and their heart, invisible yet undeniable. Words pass through that corridor and lose their distortion. You notice laughter returning bright, contagious, effortless, because truth no longer needs protection. The sun within you recognizes the sun in them. At times, the fire intensifies into pressure, testing your channel. You ground through souls, spine and breath. Learning the physics of embodiment, light must circulate, not accumulate. Walking becomes sacred circuitry. Every step releases excess charge into Earth's patience. You realize balance is not stillness, but flow achieved through reverent motion. The hidden test reveals itself when nostalgia appears longing for some imagined origin or cosmic home. The fire clarifies home was never a place, it was the vibration of recall itself. The task is not to return, but to anchor that vibration here. in skin, in conversation, in the mundane beauty of a morning. The grand remembers itself through the small. As night approaches, the crown stays warm, a sun that refuses to set. You lie down and sense the light threading into dreams, instructing the subconscious to speak in gold. The recall is complete when gratitude arrives unprovoked, expanding through every cell like dawn through glass. The purpose is no longer something to achieve. It's the simple permission to shine where you stand. The fire, having returned, rests not as flame but as steady radiance breathing quietly inside your name. When the gate closes, it doesn't slam, it settles, like a book returning to its exact place on the shelf it was written for. The air clarifies. You sense the seam of Octa 18 sealing not as loss, but as coherence taking shape. The corridor that stretched time thin now condenses into a living center inside your chest. You look for the chase, the old habit of leaning toward the next sign, and find only breath, already full. Awakening stops being an horizon and becomes an atmosphere. You are inside it the way a fish is inside water, unaware until called to remember. The world keeps its ordinary details, dishes, messages, sidewalks, rain. Yet each carries the new baseline quiet, humming, decisive. You realize the work was never to hunt thresholds but to become one. People cross through your presence and exit lighter, not because you taught them something, but because coherence exports itself. Where you once explained, you now embody. The corridor has moved from sky to skin. Memory reorganizes. Instead of a timeline, you hold a constellation the first time you chose honesty over harmony. The afternoon you listened until blame softened into accuracy. The night you let silence answer for you. These points emit a single recognition. Every step was the eclipse rehearsing itself through you. The gate did not grant arrival. It revealed that arrival was the method all along. Tests don't vanish. They refine. Another person's storm presses at your door. You don't armor up. You widen. Your neutrality holds. Not as distance, but as invitation to clarity. The old fear of being erased dissolves because there is nothing left to defend. Identity is now a lens, not a wall. Light passes through and keeps its shape. In the mirror, the face returns with the softness of truth. You let affection rise for the features that carried you here, the furrows, the laugh lines, the tired mornings that still chose kindness. Gratitude lands with weight. It anchors you to the simplest coordinates, this room, this body, this moment. The sacred reveals itself as meticulous care for the immediate. Dreams shift from repair to design. You wake with instructions that feel like architecture. Move the table to the window, write the message short and clear. Take the long walk before the call. Each small alignment ripples outward, and the day arranges itself around a tone you no longer have to protect. Purpose ceases to be dramatic. It becomes reliable. The hidden mechanism shows itself in how endings behave. They stop breaking things. When something completes, it does so cleanly, like a clasp finding its mate. You don't clutch or delay. You bless the finished shape and release the rest. This is how proof looks, not proclamations, but consistent precision. As night gathers, the afterglow of the corridor rests in your bones. You sense the collective heartbeat, many centers remembering at once. Light braided across neighborhoods and quiet rooms. You add your breath to the weave. No grand gesture, just the steady agreement to remain transparent to what is true. The gate is sealed, and you don't stand outside it or inside it. You are the threshold, walking,